All right, I'm Mike Burnett, and welcome to the Real Squabble with Kevin, Jackie, Glenn, Sue, and my daughter, Bethany Henry. Nice to see everyone. Today, we're talking about transgender in a straightforward and honest way. We'll also look at the lighter side of entertainment later on in the show. But before we do, let's do a couple quick introductions for folks who haven't met other members of our team. Kevin Harris, tell folks about yourself.
I am originally from East Texas. I've had a radio career that's taken me through Cincinnati, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin. And I've moved back to small town, my hometown, and have kind of rediscovered my love for songwriting and music. And so I'm doing a lot of that. And I produce some podcasts, including a podcast called Reasonable Faith with Dr. William Lane Craig. It's a philosophy, current events, Christian apologetics podcast. And I also do some work for a show called Texas Home Improvement, which is syndicated across Texas. People call in and ask questions about home improvement, which I know very little about, but I do all the voiceover and some things like that. And so I guess I'm semi-retired, Mike. I don't know.
Yeah, but you used to work at the original WKRP.
I did.
Cincinnati,
I worked.
didn't you?
I did. I was Johnny Fever, and
there I go.
I worked at WKRQ, which was the station that WKRP was patterned after, and so that was a lot of fun. It was great. So it's great to meet my fellow squabbies here and hang out.
All right. Hey, I think you just coined a phrase, guys. We are the squabbies. Okay.
I like it.
Good.
I like it.
Yeah. And my daughter, Bethany Henry, is on the show. She's a professional counselor. Tell folks a little bit about yourself, Bethany.
Well, I grew up in a military family. Now live in Lynchburg, Virginia, doing online counseling and coaching services.
And working on a doctorate in
psychology.
In psychology. Okay, so Kevin, she'll be helping us out after the show.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah, and I will be posting and putting the website, scrolling at the bottom of the website there. So if you have any questions or concerns about the topic of today's show, or other things going on in your life, and you'd like to make contact with newell.org, then you can look at their website. All right, before we kick into the show, let me ask you to follow us on Facebook and click below and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Real Squabble. And Jackie is here with us today, live from a fitness studio somewhere across America, to get us in trouble talking about the transgender issue today.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
And afternoon and good night.
Beautiful unnamed hotel in Omaha, Nebraska. Just flew in last night, or more correctly, early this morning from Sedona, Arizona. So I've got sunburn, so you'll see me do this a lot, and just rolled out of bed and jumped in. So good morning, everyone.
All expenses. We put out a lot of money for hair and makeup on this program, Kevin. I don't know what your Reasonable Faith podcast is like, but here we go all out.
Absolutely. So here is the unvarnished squabby of the day. Yes.
Okay. All right, Jackie, go ahead and lead us on into the subject.
Okay, super. So the topic for today is transgender, which is a very, very broad topic. And people tend to have really strong emotions on this. Pro, con, for, against. But I'm not so much interested in us discussing that as I am just talking about the way the world has changed and how this has now become a point of discussion worldwide. Or has it? So I'm going to ask the question of the entire panel first. Does anyone on the panel have someone in their family who is transgender? Wow, that's quiet.
Ish.
No.
Ish.
I have a relative that is binary and they chromosomally binary. They are both. I don't know what that condition is called. A young child. So I'm not saying names,
Yeah.
but they are chromosomally both, and so we're encouraged
Yeah.
from their genetics to be allowed to make their personal choices as they develop in age.
Well, that's called intersex, right? So that's completely different than transsexual. So and that's a real situation where I've been reading on that as well, Jackie, about that's a real condition. I mean, it's all real conditions, but
Yeah.
those are people that at birth are identified with ambiguous genitalia, and they've got to work very closely with the parents and the doctors to see what to do. And that would be that's a thing right there for me. If it was my child, I'm not going to want to give them hormones or hormone blockers or surgery at that point of life before there's some development. Every family needs to make some of their own decisions, but I just wanted to jump on that and say, when you look at that big long alphabet soup of what is it, LBGQT IA hashtag mark, squiggly line, whatever it is, that's what the I is. That's the intersex.
Yes.
So just saying, that's why I said ish, because it's,
Yeah.
it's confusing in a similar way, at least to some people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And bear in mind too that when we say the topic that we're discussing today and talking about is transgender, I'm using that as an all-encompassing. Okay? Just because if I go through the list of all the pronouns and all the titles and that are out there right now to describe different subsets of this, we'll be here all day just doing that. So just want to go ahead and make that very clear that this is kind of an all-encompassing thing. So I do have a niece, and my niece at the age of 8 decided that she wanted to be a boy. She was a little tomboy. She wants to be a boy. And her parents have worked with her, and she now refers to herself by a male name. And in speaking with her on FaceTime, I have not outright asked the question. She's now 15. Let me say that. She's now 15. But it is a fairly safe bet that hormone replacement therapy and things of this nature are in progress. Okay. It's fairly evident, the drop in the voice, all of this. So one of the first things that I want to bring up today is everybody seems to be aware of the different bills that are going around right now in Congress and in the House. And, Florida, I think, was the one that kicked it off with, we are going to teach transgender type stuff with grades K through 12, things of this nature. It's kicked off a firestorm. What are your thoughts on that, on actually having that type of a discussion with children in school? And at what age is that appropriate if you are going to have it in school? So, Glenn, I'm interested. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just hoping you were going to ask me. It's going to be appropriate to have it brought up in school. At what age? And I was just running through my head, I'm thinking about my kids. It's probably junior high. It would be when I would introduce the actual subject of talking about, I think, in my sheltered little existence, kindergarten through 6th grade, I still want to keep kids as much as possible, and not introduce so many horrible things. And I'm not that this is horrible, but this is just one of those things that is, we struggle with it as adults.
Mhm.
Why introduce something like that to children who are just trying to play and have fun? Why introduce struggles like that? It's just my personal opinion. Um,
Hmm.
I don't have a good answer.
Right. And I don't know that there is a good answer, but I'm interested in what all of you think. Kevin, where do you kind of stand on that?
Texas has been having a battle for this in legislation as to the extent that the state would have the opportunity to actually, in some of the wording and some of the legislation that has come down, to bypass the parents
Hmm.
to accommodate the child's wishes as early as 7, 8, 9, 10, even up through adolescence, of
Wow.
hormonal replacement, of radical surgery,
Hmm.
of other,
Hormone blockers.
all
Yeah.
that, all the
Hmm.
above. And with some of the language was even because we have just a bunch of conservative crazy people here. We cannot allow them to keep their children, from transforming into another sex or to identify another sex if that child wants to. And so that's been quite a firestorm, saying, no, you cannot do that. You cannot bypass parents and that child's doctor. That's something that they need to do on an individual
Yeah.
basis as a family. And but it did surprise a lot of people, how, including me, how radical it was to say, well, no, actually, because of the sensitive nature of this, and because parents don't know what they're talking about in this, we need to put legislation to accommodate that child's wishes. And I'm telling you, I never made a good decision when I was 8, 9, 10, 12 years old.
Right.
A lot of the decisions I made, I now regret when I was an adolescent. And so it is not a time to be making such a radical decision, a medical decision, but there's actually been something introduced there. And that's just for starters. We can talk about the whole nature of it a little bit later. I don't like people who struggle in this area, and it is a struggle. It is a struggle.
Right.
People who struggle in this area to be used as a political football, and they often are.
True, very true. I would agree with that. I'm going to take this next one, if I can, to Bethany. Um, just a little funny side note. Bethany is Mike's daughter. I knew her when she was much younger. I find it very interesting, Mike Burnett, that all of the women in your family have now gone down the path
Yeah.
of psychological studies. And I seem to recall we had this discussion when you and I were on the air.
Including yourself, right? Didn't you study psychology?
Yep, absolutely.
In college, right? So, Bethany for a PhD. My wife is about to finish up a master's in counseling. That's why, that's why I'm so smart. I have to proofread their papers.
I love it. Bethany, going to you, if you don't mind, real quick.
Yes.
I guess where I come out on a lot of this, especially since we've started talking about the children right now, is that the brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25.
Correct.
Give or take. Everyone is different. This is a generality. But it's not fully developed until the age of 25. And so I have a hard time with my niece at the age of 8 saying, I want to do this. And her parents going, okay, we'll support it. And again, these are very broad strokes, folks, broad strokes.
Right.
And putting her through, or not putting her through, that is not really what I want to say, but encouraging this complete change of her biology at such a young age. Because my thing is, and I don't know about anybody else, but I know that when I was 8 years old, I too wanted to be a boy. They had it better. They got to play rougher. They got to climb trees. Nobody was going, oh, no, don't do that. You go ahead and be obnoxious. Snakes, snails, puppy dogs, tails versus sugar and spice and everything nice. So, Bethany, what would you say to a parent with a child who is saying, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be the opposite sex. I don't like being a girl or a boy. What would you say?
Yeah, this is such a difficult issue. It's a delicate issue because there's so many things to consider. But yes, where I land as well is that the brain isn't fully developed. So how much should we do at that point? You know, it has to be handled with compassion. And I think one of the big issues around this, and this is just my opinion, but it's social norms. You know, we have all these social norms that are tied to gender when it could really be a bit more of a spectrum. And so people feel that they necessarily like have to fall into a particular camp because maybe they're drawn towards more masculine things or feminine things. So that would be a very long conversation and lots of sessions with a parent. So it's hard to summarize that. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, in any case, we want to empathize and we want to validate, and we don't want to cause additional distress for these children that are actually experiencing this, because this is their reality. This is their reality, even if it's at this young age. And at the same time, we don't, in my opinion, medically want to do things or provide opportunities for these children to make these huge life-altering decisions before their brain is fully developed. There's a lot of things we don't allow as a society for children to do before their brains are developed. You know, use alcohol for one.
Yeah.
So these are things that, you know, we can help them along that journey and we can provide support. But we don't necessarily need to say, yes, absolutely, let's do a full change before your brain is fully developed.
Bethany, isn't it true that about 80% of children who have this type of gender dysphoria change or come out of the gender dysphoria by the time they are that, at least that attitude or thinking that they're something that they're biologically not? I've heard that it's upwards of 80%.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a percentage on that. I would have to look into it. So I can't verify that for you. But what I will say is the American Psychological Association, one of the guidelines for working with transgender clients is understanding that children often will not stay in this place, that they may at a time have this experience and they may explore it, but that there is a strong likelihood that they could come out of it.
Hey, I would say, if I can jump in, Jackie, I think the social norming piece of that is what the militant transgender advocates and TV programmers latch onto with pushing agendas, pushing their values. And you see it just lately with Disney and what they publicly stated, you know, in audio about their content and their not so secret transgender agenda that they're pushing. And the fact that they have one of the main producers of Disney was just recorded recently saying that they have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of LGBTQIA squiggly mark hashtag. Okay, I'm just being funny, but content already that they're using to influence children. So, okay, if that is something that you want, and I totally agree, we need to love and respect these people, but parents also beware. Parents beware of what you're consuming and what is flashing up, you know, on Blue's Clues or on Sesame Street or anything else that you're watching, because it is being written quite often by advocates. And I'm certainly certain, and most of you guys know that I am a vocal Christian person, that if I made content and I got this agenda to say that I wanted every Disney movie to include something about the existence of God, there would be outrage, right? So, or even if I was on board and I was like, you know what, the public doesn't know it, but I'm in here and I want to make sure.
You know, Mike, which of the dwarves do you think is transgender that's pushing that agenda? I mean, give me some specifics here. I hear you, but I don't understand. I can't in my head think of a single Disney character that pushes this crazy left-wing agenda. So
Okay.
do you know of one?
Well, go ahead.
Mulan.
Yeah, Mulan is one of them. But also, the thing is, Sue, I'm not making this up. I just told you what 3 Disney executives said.
Yeah, no,
okay?
I hear that. But what I'm saying is then to take the leap to say, well, we better beware. I do think parents need to be conscious of the content of what they're feeding their kids. But you could say that in Dr. Seuss, and you could say that in Nancy Drew, and you could, so I'm just looking at, are there, in my mind, and I'm an old lady now with grandchildren that aren't even reading or watching Disney anymore. So I cannot name one. I cannot name a thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so offensively pushing an agenda. So
how about on Blue's Clues the other day when it had little cartoon drag queen characters coming out?
I didn't see Blue's Clues the other day, but I have never in my life seen a kid that doesn't want to dress up in other gender stuff for clowning around and, Grandma, can I try on your shoes?
Yeah. Well, that's different, I think, because, I dressed up as a girl in the Halloween of 1969. All right. I don't think that kind of, or boys playing with dolls or girls playing with trucks, I don't think there's any issue with that whatsoever. And I don't see much difference between being careful and being aware and being careful. I think those are all synonymous words. And you're exactly right. I think that there are a lot of parents that I think are asleep at the wheel. And I think I have probably been asleep at the wheel. Look how bad my daughter turned out. That they're not careful, and kids are going to be kids too. Okay, when they get to a certain age, you're not going to be able to stop them from exploring and looking and thinking. Neither should you, but you should not have to answer certain questions before they're mature enough to understand even what you're talking about when it's related to it. And I think that's what we all said earlier. Before they've reached a time when, like I think you said, Glenn, when they're in junior high, when they might normally start having sex health education or whatever, they call it these days.
Yeah, let me speak to that as well. Just as a mom of a 4-year-old, I was watching Blue's Clues with my son, and it was actually it was a gay pride parade, or it was the whole LGBTQ plus parade that they were promoting. So in that case, it was very overt. And I thought to myself, is this a conversation that I'm ready to have with my 4-year-old yet? And I think maybe not necessarily. It would be more appropriate to have those conversations as they move into understanding sexuality at all. I don't necessarily want to have conversations about sex or sexuality with my son at that age in general. So, personally as a parent, I don't appreciate that, as opposed to characters that may embody more masculine traits. For example, in Encanto, I'm trying to think of the lady's name, but she's the strong one in the family. She takes on a lot of these more traditionally masculine traits. But I actually love that as a woman. I love that she is strong and that she's saying, that women can be strong and have all these different things, different qualities outside of the traditional norms. So I think there's a difference between those types of things that are subtle, but then the more overt things of teaching children the specifics of these.
Yeah, but I don't think we're teaching your 4-year-old the specifics of heterosexuality either. I don't think anybody's teaching that. But what I do think is that, the conversation on the playground happens way before junior high school. Pointing out differences. Right. That happens in first and second and third grade when they're out on the, on the playground. And I don't know whether, and I really don't know the answer, but I don't know whether it's better to address it or to let it happen organically in an uninformed way, like the playground.
I think you should address it, but I don't think your teacher needs to address it in a curriculum.
No, I think that's right.
So,
I think that's
so
right.
so that's the issue I have. I heard a teacher, I was listening to something while I was traveling back from Virginia, yesterday, and there was this gay teacher, a homosexual teacher, however you would phrase it, which I have no qualms with. I have family members that are gay and lesbian,
That's like saying my best friend is black.
and family members. Well, I like to just make it clear that I'm not trying to be hateful, because immediately, as soon as you start speaking about this issue, people try to say that you're a bigot, or you're hateful, or you're transphobic, and all those things that even people who watch this video will immediately accuse me of being, which I'm not.
Well, and I think that I'm sorry, I'm just going to interject real quick. I think that brings in another part of this topic. Are we, what is it that we are actually opposed to? What is it that you're actually opposed to? Are you opposed to, I mean, look at the panel. For the most part, we were all raised in a certain generation, right? And I can remember when I was raising, I have 3 kids, they're all grown now. But I can remember when I was raising my children, if one of them didn't feel pretty enough, at school, her friends were prettier. Or if Matthew wasn't interested in sports or what have you, right? The phrase parents would use was, God doesn't make mistakes. And so you have that now and this coming up. So my question, I guess, for the panel to move us along a little bit is this actually a question of sexuality, or is this a question of labeling?
I think it's even deeper. I think it's a labeling. Everyone's going to put a label on the things that they're trying to identify. We had that conversation when we talked about being woke, didn't we, Glenn? I think you brought that up about the fact that people are going to label things and what you're doing because you're trying to understand it. But there's a difference in trying to label and understand in a loving, respectful way, or just being mean, nasty person, right? But also we label and we label in context, I think, with our worldview, with our values, with our personal values, and we should we do that. But I think what I don't want, and I will continue to teach my children. I have taught my children and teach my grandson are my values. What I don't want is a curriculum at a school which is informed by someone's values, teaching my children something completely opposed to what I believe to be true, and say no, your mother and father, they're messed up, and I'm going to have to drag you out of your house so we can give you some hormone blockers to make sure that they're not abusing you in that kind of way, because you think you're Mary Poppins, and by God, we're going to let you be Mary Poppins. I don't want teachers, and this is where I was going a minute ago before we shifted. Teacher was saying, he was a gay teacher, and he says, when I come back from a weekend, I want to be able to tell my students where I've been and what I've done. And I thought, okay, well, you have teachers that are unmarried, you have teachers that are gay, you have teachers that are married, and they all in context will say what they've been doing. And he said, I don't want to be afraid to say that me and my partner went canoeing this weekend. I think, well, okay, you shouldn't have to be afraid of saying that. If they ask you what partner means and they're 5, you can give a 5-year-old definition of what a partner is, or you can say, well, ask your mommy and daddy about that.
Well, and how many 5-year-olds are going to ask for a definition of partner?
They're
because
not.
A 5-year-old's definition of partner is my friend.
So what you're saying is he had a false fear.
Yeah. That's my opinion. At dealing with children of that age, I believe that the label became more important It's the label is the all-encompassing thing. We are talking about right now in the program. We are talking about young children. Let them. I do side with Mike on this one completely. My thing is, let children be children. The world is harsh and cruel enough and confusing enough, and they will reach all of those things in time. But for now, for this precious little period of time they have when they are discovering who they are, I'm not saying don't talk with your children. I would never advocate that. But I am saying that it needs to be appropriate. I do agree it needs to come from parents. And I definitely, even though, you have those parents that, and I fell into this trap with my eldest because my husband was in the Air Force. He was constantly deployed. I worked full time. And so we bought Nicole. She had every My Little Pony on the planet to make up for the fact that we weren't there. She had whatever she wanted, right? That served her well. Was that, I mean, there are different levels of this that you can equate to almost anything. But I think where my line in the sand is, if there is a child that is just adamant that they identify, and as Bethany said, it is a very delicate balance. Very delicate balance. But here's the thing. You cannot drive a car until you are a certain age. You cannot legally drink until you are a certain age. You cannot vote until you are a certain age.
Right.
I don't think you should be allowed to make a life-altering decision at any age under the age of 25. I just don't. I think you need to have a little bit of the life. I see Sue cringing. But
well, you're not going to tell an 18-year-old that they can't do what they want to with their body. An 18-year-old has legal rights as an adult in this community. You can tell an 18-year-old you strongly recommend they work with their doctor and their counselor to discuss it, but you cannot put labels on controlling things over 18 at the very least. Anyway,
we do with alcohol though, right?
And marijuana.
A lot of things.
So
yeah, and we're talking about adolescents too. We're talking about 10, 11, 12, and 15-year-olds. So that's some of this legislation that was coming through.
I was going to say, Kevin, this is some of the things that run through my mind. I think a really interesting question is, why is there legislation addressing this? So from one side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle, what's the push? Why are people's shoulders getting behind this?
Guys, I think it's because many of our friends in the LGBTQ community are claiming transgenderism as part of their community, those who are transgendered or who have any kind of transgender issue, to come on and be a part of our community. And if we are able to protect and promote and legislate and all these other things, our transgender friends, that's also going to protect our sexual orientation and things like that. And so that seems to be it. This is what I mean by a political football in many cases. They fear that their rights in the LGBTQ community are always on the cusp of being denied. And they want to protect that. And part of the way to protect that is to also bring in, I think, many in that community, also bring in transgender people and say, see, we also have these people, and we need to protect them as well. Because it's puzzling. Why the interest? Why does the LGBTQ community have such an interest in the whole transgender area? And it's because, and there's kind of some schizophrenia going on here, because there's a balance in nature, male and female. in the most secular worldview in the world, there's this balance of male and female. In all the world religions, there is a balance of male and female. And there are many in the LGBTQ community, and some of the more radical ones, who want to get rid of this balance completely. Why? So we'll be more balanced. And so it tends to undercut itself. It tends to pull the rug out from under itself. What does it do to women's rights if we get rid of definitions of women? Well, then that will completely eliminate the women's rights movement and the progress that women's rights movements have made.
Yeah, we're seeing it in sports right now.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I was just going to move us into sports and stuff.
Well, I don't mind moving to sports, but just briefly, I just want to go back to, if you do what Bethany suggested and you have a very in-depth conversation with doctors and counselors and parents, I think to answer your question, Kevin, I think that what that community wants is that when a family has come to that decision and come to that process of, we're going to let Johnny dress as a girl now. No, we're not physically changing them. We're not injecting them. We just need Johnny to work this out and be a girl in class now. I need the school to support the medical decisions and the parental decisions that are being made. And I don't believe that those LGBTQ, and that's how it is, Mike, LGBTQ, I don't believe that those families feel they are being heard. I think they feel they are being pushed out of those conversations, and they're getting more vehement about their parental rights. And there's a balance, right? The whole country is built on the concept of compromise. So in the case of what you're asking, why did they all join up together? Well, coalition building among minorities is not unique.
That's right.
Happening.
Yeah.
For minorities, they're building a coalition to try to be heard because they can't get into the school board locally and allow Johnny to dress as a girl this year.
And they don't want to be bullied. And they don't.
Right.
The anti-bullying movement came out of the LGBTQ community. Why didn't it come out of the church? I mean, we've been saying that for 2,000 years. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat each other with kindness. Lift one another up. Don't tear each other down. And yet there's been this necessity of a huge movement saying, please stop bullying.
Well, and because they have been bullied, they've been mistreated, they've been done rotten, and like Sue said, that's why they're forming together to have some power. And I want them to feel love and respect and empowered to be successful people. What I don't want them to do is, and quite honestly, Sue, if you're the parent and you have Johnny, and Johnny wants to be Joanne, right? And you dress Johnny to be Joanne, and you want me to call Johnny Joanne, I can do that. But what I can't do is, if Johnny is a biological male and you want to ask me a direct question. All right, if we're being at dinner, I'm going to be polite, but we're talking about the issue in a public forum. If I'm you're at my house or I'm at your house, I'm going to be polite, right? I'm going to do that. I'm going to have that social contract. But in the big scope of curriculums and sports, if you try to tell me that Johnny is a girl and he should be on the women's swim team as Leah is, I'm going to go, time out. You're also at that point, I think maybe Kevin mentioned that earlier, you're setting feminism back 100 years. All these women that have worked hard, my wife and maybe you guys too, didn't have that many sports opportunities coming up. It's starting to equalize some. Women are allowed to get in. But if they start saying that there is no man, there's no woman, and it's fluid, that's a thing too, isn't it? Where you can wake up and you can be fluid. You can think I'm a woman today, I'm a man tomorrow. Well, Well, what prevents anyone in the NCAA men's division or the NCAA women's division from, switching up tomorrow? Go, you know what? I'm going to play in the Sweet 16 on the women's team tomorrow, right? And or what if, hey, here, you will love this, liberals amongst us here. What if Donald Trump, the day before the election, had woken up and go, actually, I'm going to run as a woman tomorrow. I feel like a woman, and I think I'll go on the ticket as a woman because you know what? I'm the best woman there ever was. I'll be huge as a woman. You know how Donald Trump would say it, right? And the thing is that women, I think, should be terribly upset about is that, these guys, they go on these sports teams and now they're better women than women are, okay? Because they're beating them. So they're better at being women than you are.
I'd like to actually have Bethany weigh in on this, if you don't mind, Beth.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's a tough one because I like to identify as a feminist, and I don't like the idea of people that have a biological advantage being able to step into our playing field. But on the other hand, these are people that truly believe and identify and feel that they are the gender that they identify with. And there is a very human piece of that it I think deserves compassion.
Right.
And I think I don't have answers. I don't think any of us have answers. That's why everyone's talking about it. But it's one of those things that deserves more thought and care, because do we just make fun of these guys? Do we just make memes about them? Do we just spread more hate? Because that seems like it's what's happening. And that is not what needs to be happening, but it should promote real conversations. How do we treat people with respect and compassion and equality, regardless of where they fall? And yes, these people fall into a very small minority and a unique group. And no, maybe they should not be able to compete as biological women, in the same way that they might eliminate a woman for taking steroids or something of that nature, because it creates advantages over others. But I do think that it's worth more time and consideration on how do we handle these things, and not just lashing out against these people who are real people who are struggling. And they also have a very high rate of depression and suicide. And so they need better, and they deserve better as well, just as humans.
Bethany brings up,
and I think we can all, a lot of us have done reading on the subject. Some of us have background in the areas of psychology, but most emotion comes from one of two places: love or fear. And that takes me back to what I had said earlier in the program. Is it coming from fear? Because this is something that a very large part of the American population, who has now reached the age of 50 and above, let's say, this was not something that we grew up with. This was not, much like our parents. Those short skirts, you can just put that away, and they're 2 inches below your knee, young lady, or you are not going to, and you can't be a cheerleader, because that was my dad. Okay, I'm just telling you, it was there. But there's that generational thing. So is this all more fear-based? Does it need to be more love-based? What do you feel? I'm going to just flip it to Glenn real quick, Mike, because we tend to not let Glenn talk. I mean, we like him, but we don't let him talk. He's just here. Aesthetics,
Yeah. So a couple, is it so? Kevin, you were talking about the Christians. We should have had. We shouldn't have needed legislation because of the having Christian love and the compassion and just to that point real quick, every Christian I've known, including myself, is really good at one thing, and that's sinning. And
sure, it's a human condition.
Yeah, I mean we're especially as a little boy, man, I was a mean little boy. You can ask my two little sisters.
You were mean when I worked with you in Bremerhaven.
I was still a little boy. I wasn't quite 25 yet.
Good point.
So it takes a while for us to sort. I mean, I do we let our kids have tattoos? No, we don't let our kids have tattoos. Do we let them? Do we look at the major league batting all-time home run slugger and put an asterisk next to him because they doped? Yeah, that's what's going to happen now. Is we're going to have a little asterisk next to this person's name because they were competing sort of unfairly, but they competed and they won or they didn't win. It's a tough one. And it's just going to end up, we're going to have to add an asterisk to the LGBTQ lineup.
Yeah. What if you're like, I forget the name of the UFC fighter, maybe you know, Kevin, or one of you guys, that did not announce that he had transformed into a woman and beat the living hell out of the woman a couple of times in the arena in the UFC, right? Now, is that a lawsuit? Because he truly, like Bethany, you said they truly believe. I think some truly do believe. I think some has been societal norming, like you said. I think there's an array of just like anything on a spectrum of where people are with that. So you have a lot of issues, and I agree with Glenn, but and maybe that's going to be the answer ultimately, but you can't keep gaslighting logic, right? You can't, for those who are have ambiguous genitalia, they're intersex, they're struggling with what might be dysphoria, or they're not. I mean, the DSM used to call it a disorder. I think they moved toward calling it a dysphoria. It's still meaning, and maybe Bethany can speak to that more, means that you're distressed over it. But to me, whether you're distressed over it or not, right? If you are diagnosed with what's the thing when you anorexia, right? When you want to lose weight, that's like a dysphoria or a disorder, right? Or what about body identity disorder, where you feel like you don't need one of your arms when you're 8 years old, right? And you have something like that. Is that okay to do that because the kid said, you know what? I think I don't need to eat, and I think weighing 35 pounds is okay. We treat those people. We put them in counseling. We there's things that we do to support and show love to those people. No, we don't treat them mean. We don't discount them. We don't hate. I think if you're hating on them in any kind of way, you're wrong. If you're hurting someone like that, you're disrespecting them in public or in private, then you're wrong. And from what I believe, but I also think that we can't just say, and it is in the curriculum. It is there. There's a story, you can look it up online. There's one about Ruthie for 5 and 6 year olds where it says, and I wrote it down. It says, Ruthie is a transgender girl. That means she was born. When she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. So actually, Ruthie and the teachers all skipped science class about the X and the Y chromosome, because if you actually have two X's or an X and a Y, you are a male and a female, or you have some type of mental issue going on, or you have some type of intersex issue going on.
Yeah,
can I address Glenn real quick?
Glenn,
because Glenn is I agree with him, and the way I was trying not to say it this way, because it can be very frustrating to say, if we would just get our act together, well, we wouldn't have XYZ problems. Well, yeah, isn't that the truth? But
Yeah.
we're flawed people. We're not perfect people, and Carrie Cruel kids can really bully one another. Hopefully, when you become an adult, you realize that it's cruel to be a bully. Now, a lot of adults don't get that, but and I certainly don't want to put the blame on the Christian church or the faith community that this whole movement, this anti-bullying movement, has become necessary. It's just that I do want us to be aware that this community has felt very bullied, and that's why they've used their talents so extensively and their influence in the media to be for this anti-bully campaign. But I don't want to go down that road of saying, well, it's our fault because we should have had our act together. Well,
no, but we should have, and I believe from the time they go to school, before they go to school, and we should have active anti-bullying campaigns in our school. That should be part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to answer Jackie, which is you asked if it was fear coming from fear or love. And my perception is that the bulk of the legislation that is out there these days is from fear. And it's really the fear of the unknown. It's people not sure what they're worried about, but they're different. Those people over there are different. And I don't know what that is. I don't want to know. I don't want to get all up in that. I just don't want my kids to know anything about it. Boom. I think there's a lot of that. There certainly is plenty of that in Virginia. But my point is, even the ones they're afraid that their kid learning anything about that is going to suddenly turn their kid into that. I just think that it's a lot more about fear than it is love.
But you think age appropriate?
Aren't perfect, but I think it's a whole lot more about fear than it is love. And that's not where I live. And that's not where I come from, which is why a lot of times people will go, oh my God, she's over there on the left. No, it's just that I'm interested in acceptance and finding a way to make sure that we can validate what a kid is feeling, no matter what label somebody, usually externally, is applying to them. And it doesn't matter if it's the kid sitting next to them going, I don't like redheads. There's all these things, and it's all part of that bullying thing that needs to be taught and taught out. But you have to be carefully taught. That's that famous song, one of my favorite songs in the world, out of South Pacific. You have to be taught to learn to hate. You have to be carefully taught. You are not coming out of the womb in a hate mentality. That is taught to you and applied to you by the prejudices and the opinions of the adults, mostly in your environment. So you're given that, and that's what you go off to school with. And then other people's parents are influencing what you learn and blah, 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 blah. But you're taught to hate. You are not taught to love.
That is very true. And that is one of my favorite songs. I love musical theater. That is one of my favorites as well. And when it comes to this particular topic, again, I agree. Everyone has pretty much said there is no easy answer. There never is an easy answer on the tough stuff. And this is one of the toughs. It is. Right? Yeah. It is also reality. So my feeling is to shut it down and say, not in my school, not in my house, not in my, it's not going to stop anything. No. Remember the whole, what was it? The Just Say No campaign for drugs and for sex. And did that really influence the numbers? No. Sometimes the taboo is more appealing at times. So I do think it is a very careful line. But again, the one thing that I will always stand firm on is, acceptance and love. But please do not make a life-altering decision before you are 100% sure. And you cannot be 100% sure at age 8 or age 15. And quite frankly, I was never 100% sure at 25 when the brain was formed. So, there's that.
Can I ask everyone, and something that Bethany brought up, and that is, there are actually very, very, very few people who struggle in this area. That does not diminish their struggle, but I think it's something like 1.5 to 1.8 million Americans have some kind of gender dysphoria. That's less than 0.05%. It's extremely small. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not important, but I remember a social studies teacher of mine saying that you can't legislate on extremes.
Right.
And I think that that we have to be careful of that, because then it's just it gets really crazy. And I think the example that he used was there are some people who have a physical reaction to the color red, and so you can't make any red lights, any stoplights. You're gonna have to find another color for stop signs and for red lights. Well, okay, what color are we going to use? Well, let's go with orange. Yeah, but there's some people who are freaked out by the color orange. You know, so
Sue,
you can't legislate on extremes. We just have to kind of do our best. And yet, the transgender thing is a huge movement right now, and so with a very small people who need love, compassion, and need to work this out, but it's just a very small amount of people. Now, don't think I'm being insensitive. Again, let me just say the struggle is real, but all this huge legislation efforts and all this awareness, and Disney, you know, wanting to change their business model and all these things, which one of the largest companies in the world, based on this small group of people who in an imperfect world are struggling with identity and gender issues. They need compassion, love, support, and need to be able to work this out.
Many of them are not struggling.
Okay, maybe struggling is an insensitive word. We certainly would make it a struggle in that if we're back to the bullying thing, but if a person is having trouble with or if a person is trying to carve out their identity and find out what's going on with them, and yet they're having difficulty doing that because of the resistance, you know, against it. It's not a very good environment. So can we make it safe for everybody? Well, no, but we can do our best.
Okay. Hey, we're getting close to an hour. So Jackie, do you have any final comments? We'll leave the lighter side for another show. I think this was an important topic to stick with today. I think there is fear and love. I think the fear comes in when we feel like things are being imposed on us or our children, because we get very protective. I think we should always educate our children. Bethany will be the first to tell you that we had every conversation at our dinner table, that these kinds of conversations at our dinner table, they're important. If you're hiding conversations, you're hiding the sex conversation, the gender conversation from your children, you're doing yourself and society a disservice. Regardless of your values, people with different values can talk about it and get along. And that's one of the reasons we started this show, because we all have a variety of opinions and looks and beliefs. It's important that we don't hide behind Facebook somewhere and call people names and pop up memes, but that we do love and respect everyone. Jackie, you close us out here, and then I'll wrap the show up.
Okay, so we're talking about the transgender and LGBTQ communities and what this means to our children. And I think a lot of very good points were made on both sides of this current issue. Can't we focus on teaching our children to be good, decent, kind individuals? Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps that's a message for the adults, because we seem to have the problem. That's how I'm going to end it. Mike, go ahead with whatever you want to do to close it out.
No, okay. Hey, thanks for Kevin joining us. He'll be with us on future shows. So will other members that aren't here today. And my daughter, Bethany Henry, if you want to do another plug for where you do coaching and counseling.
Oh, sure. It's newwell.org, and it's all online telehealth-based counseling and coaching.
All right, we talk about a lot of things on this program. We talked about woke before. We are talking about transgender today. Future shows, we'll talk about reparations and some other sensitive topics. We don't want to shy away from it here. We also have a comment section here where you can put comments while we're live, and we'll try to address them in future shows as we can. Sometimes we listen back and misspeak. Sometimes we're here now and we know that we didn't say something we wanted to or misspoke. That's what I call our time for saved rounds. Anything. All right, you guys spoke perfectly today.
Perfectly.
All right. Thank you, guys. That concludes our ultra fine show. Tell us what you think about the Real Squabble, and remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe to YouTube. We'll see you next time on the Real Squabble.